All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. So welcome to our e-talk series. We've been doing this for a couple of years now with this format. It's just an opportunity for students to meet people within the entrepreneurship world, maybe learn something, but also the potential to network. And so today, I'm really thrilled to introduce our guest. His name is Bo DiBuono. Am I pronouncing that?
Yeah, that's correct.
DiBuono. Okay, excellent. He's the founder of Manor Sangria, which crafts small batch handcrafted sangria. I'm not a drinker, so we'll have a conversation about this. But also Happy Kid Lunch, which provides quite the contrast. Provides healthy meals to local students. So please join me in giving a nice warm welcome to our very special guest, Bo. All right, so let's just start. So what is these businesses that you currently run?
So these two companies, like you said, have vast differences between them, but a lot of the principles that I operate my companies with are the same. Now, Happy Kid Lunch is something that I started pretty much right out of college. So I've had this business for about 20 years. I grew up in the food business, so I was really familiar with the business, but I was always very creative, and I like to view things in a different light and see how can I do stuff differently than what's already being done.
Okay, yeah, so interesting. And so to set the stage for this sort of story that we're going to go through, first I want to point out what I just found out is that you are an alumni of Iona, right? So you graduated a few years ago, and and had this entrepreneurial spark, right? What you're describing is, recognizing the limitations of things. And so maybe you can just speak to that process of how you went from a college graduate, right, where everyone stands in the room today, to becoming a business owner.
Sure. So, I mean, it's not really as complicated as you think it might be, right? Anyone can start a business at any time. You hear all these stories, I think, about people who maybe like sold lemonade on the side of the road or had a paper route. That's like the cookie cutter early entrepreneurial story, right? But that does kind of influence maybe how you're gonna later on own a business or become an entrepreneur. So I think from a young age, I've been around in my family a lot of people that own businesses, are their own boss. I think we often think now about entrepreneurial ventures as maybe like tech ventures or AI type ventures, but that's not necessarily true. Your local plumbers, electricians, restaurant owners, we're all entrepreneurs. And so a lot of the same principles apply throughout. And yeah, when you have that like burning desire inside to say like, I want to be my own boss, I want to create something new from scratch, it's really not, like I said, it's not that complicated to do. And so when it came to the food business, which I've been in and around my entire life, I just thought like, hey, I'll give it a try. I don't know what's going to happen, but I'll just start. And that's really kind of how it played out.
And what I love about your story, and I think why it's great that we have you here today, is that you're not starting a tech company. People associate entrepreneurship with
I have, though, before.
Okay,
Yeah.
you've
We'll
been
get
down
to
that
that.
route. We'll get there. It's an ordinary business, right? This is what the world is powered by, right? Beverage company, right? And you're making real products, right? Which I think people can relate to a little bit more. And how you mentioned, right? If you're a plumber, landscaper, this is business ownership, right? And there's so many opportunities for business ownership in these areas that are not ordinarily associated with the glamour of like big tech and venture capital and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, at the core of any business is people, right? We're solving problems for people. And so whether it's doing it through background technology or doing it through everyday, like products for consumption or just general products. You know, people are at the core. So to me, entrepreneurship is also understanding people, how people work, what people need, and how you can potentially like improve life for people and make their daily stuff a little bit easier.
Yeah, this is a heavy emphasis that I place if you take my course. You got to understand people. Ultimately, it's delivering value to people, no matter what business that you are getting into, right? So it's great to sort of validate that approach, that this is essentially what business is all about. So how did you arrive at this particular business then? Is this a problem that you recognize?
Not exactly. So I think when you're an entrepreneur, you're just very open-minded, and you're always observing and learning. You never stop learning as a business owner. You have to continuously learn and grow. And I think that's where we spend a lot of our time, even though it might not be seen outwardly, but we do a lot of time, research and learning. So my path is not straightforward. So my most successful venture to date is my Sangria company. But I never sat down somewhere and said, I want to start a Sangria company. I mean, the story's pretty incredible. I can't even drink the Sangria. I'm allergic to all the fruits. So I don't love Sangria. I didn't know a lot about Sangria. It's not like I had a lot of experience with it when I started it. But it's actually a byproduct from my food service company. And so that's kind of how it started. If you want, I could go into a little more detail as to how this all transpired.
Wait. I am fascinated by the idea. There's something deeply psychological about you starting a business based on something that's like deadly to you. So you're allergic to fruit, and you built, I don't know, right? You've transmuted or something,
Well,
this disabling force in your life to something very enabling.
yeah, people have likened it to, let's say, like a blind artist or
Right.
a deaf musician. I kind of put it towards like, I think like Biggie Small said it best, like don't get high on your own supply. So
yeah.
I'm not drinking the Sangria, I'm producing it, and that keeps me really focused. But I get high off the reactions of my customers.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting. I don't think you have to love something personally to be successful at it. But you do have to go back to the core, like I said, love the people that are buying and purchasing and your customers, etc. That's the important part. You have to understand them, and that's what makes a venture successful.
Yeah, and this is really demonstrated in such a fascinating but yet profound way, because I'm just sort of thinking through this on the fly. But the fact that you can't really have your product, right? Normally we associate business ownership or entrepreneurship with this passion for the product that you're selling. But yet this product is deadly to you. So there's something else that you're putting into this, beyond just the taste or satisfaction, consumption of your product, right? Maybe part of this process is recognizing that that's not enough, right? And so this is why you put this emphasis maybe on the people, that the business is ultimately not about that, right? It's about connecting with people in the right way. Maybe there's a focus on the process that you have that others do not.
Well, so the actual recipe was constructed out of feedback for many years from the people. So this truly is a product, unbiased. My taste palette never influenced the recipe. It's touted as the best sangria in the world. And that says a lot, because Spain, Portugal, South America, all regions that have incredible sangria. But my sangria wasn't derived from one culture or one person or even a small group of people. This recipe was constructed over 20 years from thousands of people. And I never decided to actually sell it as a product until COVID, when I was bored and had nothing to do. And that's when I decided, well, if everyone says this is the best, maybe it is. Maybe I should get licensed. Maybe I should try to sell it. And what's also really interesting about the story, and this is something that I do like to share with people, not only from this product, but just when I'm advising people, if you want to start a company, if you want to be a business owner, don't get caught up in the weeds of thinking of the name, thinking of the logo, thinking of I have to get all my IP locked up. You just have to get out there and do it. I made the name Manor Sangria in a matter of seconds. The logo took 5 minutes, and the logo is now recognized all over. It's simple. It's kind of like the Nike swoosh.
Right.
So, you don't have to put a lot of time or effort into it, but where the time and effort goes is into building what that actual symbol means, the look of the logo, the name, putting a personality to it. So I know a lot of people get caught up like I have to build my website or I have to build my social media page or spending countless hours trying to assume what the consumer wants to see or feel. Let them tell you. Just get it out there. You can always adjust it. I mean, people's memory span now is not so long. So you can do stuff, it's gone in a matter of seconds.
So I was going off on this Freudian tangent of sublimation in addressing, how you started a business based on something that is essentially poisonous to you. But really, I think, as I see it, this is a lesson in how you don't want to get in the way of yourself, right? A lot of people, right, and we talk about this through design thinking, you're focusing on what's right for you, right? And you're projecting all of that onto everyone else, but ultimately you're in a business that builds a product for others, not for yourself, right? You're selling to customers, and the fact that you can consume your product means that you're 100% focused without any of that bias, right, on the actual needs and interests and preferences of your customers, right? And so I wonder if this is where, maybe you got an advantage from this, because I think that this is the pathway, right, to success. This is part what we teach here through design thinking. I don't know.
I think that's accurate. I mean, this venture also has occurred after like a 20-year path of trials and errors, successes and failures. This is my most successful venture to date, but that doesn't become that way unless I have all the other ventures. I've opened up brick and mortar like fast food places. I've done ventures in tech. I've raised millions of dollars. I've lost millions of dollars. You're on this path. This is why I say you don't know what it is. You don't want to put too much thought into it at the onset. Just get on the path. Just get going. The path's going to take you where it wants to go. And so, I've done consumer products. I've done all kinds of stuff. I've made a lot of money and I've lost a lot of money. But I think you're right. Like for me, at this juncture, not putting any of my own bias into the product and really just listening to the customer, which I can't stress enough how important that is. And then using what you learn from the customer and amplifying that through the message of your company. It's so important.
But also, you also highlight that you've had a lot of failures along the way. And this is also really, really important and really instructive. Entrepreneurship only works within a culture that doesn't view that as some sort of flaw in who you are or what you do. Failure is part of the entrepreneurship process, right? You have to put stuff out there, and whatever doesn't work, you got to get feedback and use that to improve upon whatever it is that you're doing, right? That's the process. Right? There are cultures. I mean, they've done studies on this that compare entrepreneurship in different countries, and if you're within a culture that views that as a failure, nobody's going to want to become an entrepreneur, and there's a lot less entrepreneurship that happens because no one wants to fail. And this is essential, right, to growth and progress within entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, look, we're human, so when you don't achieve your goals, the natural reaction is to maybe be upset or get down on yourself and maybe not want to get out there and do it. There's a million different analogies I can give to prove this point. There's a lot of sports references that you can use also to drive it home. But the fact of the matter is, I mean, one of the most simplest thing is when we all first learn how to walk, we don't walk without falling, right? And so, you know, you hear a million stories out there too about, you know, don't ever quit, don't give up. I do think to a certain degree, like when you're in a venture and you don't, there's no light at the end of the tunnel, you have to be smart enough to say, at this juncture, this theory that I had, this company that I started, is just, there is no end result. And it could be draining both financially and mentally and physically. And so you have to know when to cut the cord. I think good entrepreneurs know when it's time to cut. Bad entrepreneurs keep barreling through to say, well, you know, I'm right no matter what. And I think that's where you see like bigger failures. If you know it's not going to work and you truly know, like for instance, when I did a tech venture, I thought it was brilliant. My partner actually is a professor here. I won't mention his name. He has a doctorate. He's one of the smartest guys I know. And we came up with this predictive model. Well, he really came up with it, but I marketed it and we turned it into an app. And we raised a lot of money. And at a certain point, it just wasn't sticky. No one cared about it. No matter what application we used it in, it wasn't working. And so we had to come to terms with the fact that either we continue to use the rest of the money we raised, and potentially these investors would never get their money back, or we cut the cord now, they get half their investment back, and you know, maybe that's the best case scenario. And it turned out that those same investors later invested with me again. So, you know, you have to be smart. You can't just be blindly barreling through, especially when you take investor. Right. If you want to do that with your own money, go for it. But when you take outside money in, you have to be conscious. I think that's an important thing to, you know, because I think a lot of people think, all right, if I raise money, this is it. Like I've hit the lotto. But really, that's not true.
Yeah. So you got to know the difference between a passion project and a business, right? They're not the same. If you have a passion project, right, with your own money, and you're just committed to this idea that you want to bring to fruition, that's different than trying to build a business that, you know, has customers that want to buy your product. So you got to know when to say that this is not working, and that's not easy to do, right? It requires a certain kind of mindset. So I'd like to pivot maybe to talk about that, because when you graduated from here, your first move wasn't to become an entrepreneur. You got like a regular job. Maybe you can speak to your experience with that.
Sure, of course. So I am a student, well, was a student here. I studied finance. When I came here, finance was the path you took. You know, you wanted to work on Wall Street. That was just as glamorous as like entrepreneurship is today. So again, like times change. So I did land like the perfect job on Wall Street, very prestigious firm. Everything that I set out to do, I did. So that initially was very fulfilling. But now you get this job and, you know, you're kind of put into a box. These are your daily tasks. Kind of stay the course. Don't make any waves. Don't step out of line. Don't try to improve us in any way. But that's how it was when I graduated over 20 years ago. The world has changed. You know, the corporate experience has changed. Companies like Google and Apple and all these other like major tech companies have embraced people coming in and trying to innovate and improve and make things better. But anyway, to kind of circle back, I was waking up every day not wanting to go to this job. and it was very uncomfortable, right? Because I felt like I worked so hard to get here, and then I did get there, and I hated it. So I had to come to terms with the fact that either I'm going to do this every day for the rest of my life, or I'm going to quit and be much more creative and more comfortable in my own skin as an entrepreneur. And so I ultimately quit, and I never looked back.
And that takes courage, right? Yeah, you said you have a family of entrepreneurs. Were they supportive of you quitting? Did you have a support network that you can lean on to say, yeah, this is okay to do this, or?
I was very fortunate. I come from a very big family, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of business owners. A lot of them are in different trades, but nonetheless own their own businesses. And so yeah, they were supportive of it, but they laid out all the risks and rewards and said, if you leave this job, you just have to know you're on your own. You have to make your own way. And for me, that was kind of the challenge. That's what made me want to do it. I thought the idea of like making my own way, me making all the rules was pretty cool. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah. I mean, I'm the same way. I didn't have the same support. This was people weren't encouraging me to go out on my own. My dad was like, just work in construction or, work for sanitation. They got a good retirement plan. Like, what are you doing? And it could be difficult, right? Striking out on your own in this very sort of high-risk way. But the fact is that if you're not happy, right, you're living your life, right? And you have to understand who you are and where, you can thrive. And so if you've got that itch, right, where you want to do your own thing, then, yeah, why not go for it? Now, we talked a little bit about, for many students, you're at a point in your life now where it's a lot easier to take those kinds of risks rather than when you're older, right? So maybe this is a moment you want to think about taking advantage of, right? Was that part of the calculation?
I think so. When you're young, you don't really have anything to lose. Mm-hmm. So if you are interested in doing a venture or you have an idea for a business, now is a great time to do it. I mean, you don't have to be afraid of anything, really. And so, I kind of liken it to, I don't know, when you're a young kid, you're like really fearless, like you might ride your bike, off a staircase, right? Like you don't have anything to lose. You're not afraid, but as you get older, you kind of learn a lot more, and you might not be inclined to ride your bike off a staircase because you kind of know too much, like right. What the repercussions can be. But I think just getting out there and doing it, I can't say enough. If you're interested in doing a business, just do it. Yeah, you're probably going to stumble and fall and make mistakes. I still make mistakes, and I've owned my own companies for over 20 years, and I still make mistakes. People don't know when I make mistakes, but I do. And so you should just get out there and do it. That would be, the way I look at it. You don't have anything to lose at a young age. Now, so when you get older and you've built stuff and you've acquired assets and relationships and all sorts of stuff, you potentially do have more to lose. But as entrepreneurs, we still have that sort of fearless hope that whatever I start is going to be successful, And so that I would say that as well.
So let's build on this confidence, right? So you have a job, but you're thinking, I like to strike out on my own. Was your first move? It wasn't the beverage company.
No, my first move ever was a snack bar company, believe it or not. And I shut that down 5 years ago, retired.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was a retail establishment?
Several retail establishments. I somehow convinced many prestigious country clubs in this area to allow me to bring my company in and run all their food operations.
Okay.
So to sub out to me. Now, this wasn't common practice. I don't know how I convinced them, but I did. And it started with one country club where I brought in all my own staff, my own menus, all the food distribution, and the model worked there, and then it got easier. Other locations started contacting me and saying like, we hear you're providing a great service, we need this at our location. So then I learned how to scale and make a business out of it, and it kind of grew for about 20 years. And then again, like I say, COVID was, I think, life-changing for many businesses and entrepreneurs. And so I decided at that point, after 20 years of doing that, I decided I wanted to retire out of that business. I didn't have the same drive or passion for it. That's how I knew for me it was time to stop. I didn't have anything new to offer to that business.
Okay, yeah, interesting. I mean, look, my experience was, the passion for me goes a lot quicker than 20 years, right? So I once I get a business off the ground, I'm off to another new idea, so, but I definitely get that. But where did you come up with that idea from? Like, what was the inspiration for that idea?
I think I was just like, I was a guest at someone's country club, and I was like, man, the food here just sucks.
Okay.
Like, the service is really bad, the food's bad. I was like, I could do this a lot better. And that's while I was still working at the on Wall Street. And so that kind of, I started just thinking like, I know the food business, I grew up in the food business, I like the food business. And I just said, while I was still employed, I said, let me see if I could start to convince just one club.
Yeah.
And I was young at the time. I just graduated college, so I was surprised that they, took my pitch, but they did, and it sparked a pretty incredible business.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, and that's all it takes. I mean, what I emphasize with my students is that part of your entrepreneurial mindset is just paying attention to your world and seeing what you dislike, right? The good news is that we live in a broken world, right? Because that means that there are opportunities, right? And so even if it's something as simple as you're at some place eating their food and the food's terrible, right? These moments happen constantly. And when you're tuned to them and you notice that these are, problems that exist in the world, as an entrepreneur, you say, you know what? This is a potential opportunity. And then the second part of it is, to your surprise, you start going out in the world, interacting with the world, and doors open up, right? And you're able to actually strike deals and make things happen.
What's interesting, that's a good point that you make, that doors open up. So one thing I would offer to everyone here is that always work to the best of your ability at all times, because you never know who's watching, right? Like as much success as I've had to this point here today, this might open another door.
Yep.
But a really fun story is when I raised my first $1 million for one of my ventures, it actually came from the membership at the country club. So I actually used that experience and the connections I made there as my own sort of private venture, like private equity firm. They saw the way I worked, they saw the way I improved their club, and to go out and raise money just based on my reputation was a lot easier than going to 200 different venture capital firms or doing pitch competitions or doing all this other stuff. So that's why, like I say, it's very important. Always work to the best of your ability. Don't ever slack. If you're gonna start a business or do a business, go all in. Yeah. Don't go 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because it really doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I'm like you as well. in that time period, the ones that have stuck the longest are food, because I grew up in food, I'm passionate about food. Food's constantly changing, trends are always changing. But in that time, I've also probably started over 15 companies, sold some, shut some down, you know, whatever. But I'm the same way. For me, the intricacies of starting it up are what get me going. Once it's smooth and running, I'm bored. I don't.
That's right,
I don't want it anymore.
That's right. That's
On to the
exactly
next
right.
thing.
You know what? But this speaks to the question that you had earlier about execution, right? So he had the question. Maybe you can ask the question. Do we have a microphone? So he asked a question in an earlier session, so it'd be great to get your take on this, but it really, this conversation we're having speaks to the answer.
Yeah, how you doing? My question was just, in business, if you had to pick one, what's more important, the product or the execution? That was my question.
I would say execution. So I always say this, especially about, like, my Sangria company falls into this category. The product itself is outstanding. There's no question about it. It almost has 100% buy-through. If I do a tasting, I mean, I just have to have someone sip it, they're gonna buy it, they're gonna be a customer for life. That in and of itself can make a successful business, right? Great product, maybe not a good salesperson or whatever, or maybe not great execution. But you could also have a really bad product or bad execution with a great salesperson or team, and you could still be successful. But it's when the two meet, great product or great execution and great sales, well, I guess would fall under execution. When those two meet is when you have magical companies that scale across the country or the globe that are worth hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars. So that is a really good question. You can be successful on either leg on its own. When they both meet in perfect harmony, you have magic.
I have a follow-up to that, but before I do that, while we have the microphone in the audience, does anyone have any questions? Let's see, yeah, we got someone in the back, there we go. We're getting your steps in, Tony. That's what this is about.
I did have a question because currently I am working for a franchise at the moment, but I always been thinking of like starting my own food business in a sense. I understand just go ahead and do it from what you said. But how do you keep that motivation to continue finding something that's gonna get other people to enjoy it?
That's a good question, because I think first and foremost as an entrepreneur, you have to have the conviction. You have to convince yourself, number one, that what you're doing is gonna make an impact. People are gonna wanna join your sort of movement, I guess, if you wanna call it, right?
Yeah, let's go.
So you have to gain people, you have to first believe that very true in your heart. Because if you don't, you can fake that for a little while, but you're gonna burn out, and so is the entire thing. So you have to really believe in yourself, that's number one. Once that happens, you have to execute your idea, right, and make it work. But throughout the entire thing, you have to have that passion. People will join your cause, your movement, your company, your brand. I think in today's day and age, it's so easy as a founder to share your passion with the world through social media. I mean, it's just so easy, right? You just can create a page, start building a following, have that following also start spreading your message. I'm of course simplifying this for there's a lot more intricacies that go into that, but at the core of it is the belief in yourself and your idea. And that's like when we talk about entrepreneurship, having that passion, that burning desire, because if you have that, it won't die out. To go into business just to make money is not enough. You might fail. You will fail.
Yeah.
Like, I don't ever work a day in my life thinking I'm doing this to make money. I'm doing it to make a difference. I'm doing it to either make people's life easier or bring joy or something like that. But it's never to make money. Because actually, if you calculate the amount of hours entrepreneurs work in a day, it doesn't work out.
I mean, especially in the early days, right?
Yeah. I mean, well, you know what? A lot of people say that. I'm going in the opposite direction. The more involved I'm getting throughout my life, I'm dedicating more and more time. It's like a snowball, really, you know? So I've never, I think we were talking about this earlier, I think is an important thing. You know, you hear like a lot of times when you go in, you need to make this business plan and you're either gonna own the company for your entire life or you're gonna plan your exit, right? And that's fine, that may be your plan. I never go into a venture with an exit plan. And the reason being is because I feel like you're destined for failure to do that. Now, there's a lot of argument to be made on that.
Right.
If I was offered hundreds of millions of dollars, well, see you later. But I feel like at the onset, if you go in with that idea, even you know, a lot of business plans, especially when you're going to raise money, they're going to want to know what's the exit plan, because these are investors, right? They are putting up money, they want a return. So how are they going to get it?
Yeah.
Exit plan's an easy way.
Yep.
But I feel like that's a flawed, in the a true entrepreneurial world, that's a flawed approach.
That's right, because if you have a true passion for what you're doing, why are you going to want to let that go, right?
Exactly.
You're not going to sell it to someone, you're not going to sell out. Make sure you guys connect, right?
Yeah, happy to speak in more detail about what you have in mind and guide you a little more on that.
And so what were the steps that you took to actually get into the beverage industry? Because that is, I mean, you hear the stories, we talked a little bit about it, where these companies start a beverage business and they get these massive exits when they sell out to Pepsi, right?
Sure.
And they become billionaires, right? There's a ton of money to be made. But it is so hyper competitive, right? What gave you the confidence to enter this area? What was that process like?
So for me, right, I have the school cafeteria business. I have over 100 employees. We're serving tens of thousands of lunches per day across multiple school properties. So I already have that going on. So I don't really, at this point with the beverage, to start that, have anything to lose. That's like a side gig.
Gotcha.
Right?
Gotcha.
And so that's kind of how it started. But I also have the confidence of over 20 years of selling this product by the glass at these country clubs to know that there's a market for it.
Gotcha.
Now, my packaging becomes a little bit different than the normal wine bottle.
Okay.
My brand's a little more me, right? So it's not fake because it's coming from me. I'm focusing on all the fresh ingredients that I put into it. And really, this venture became one of the most frictionless ventures that I've ever had, and it just so coincidentally also is one of the most successful I've ever had.
Wow.
So just to put into perspective, it took me 20 years to build a cafeteria company, hundreds of employees, like I say, all these lunches, and I'm already doing more revenue in the beverage company that I started only 4 years ago.
Wow.
And so the growth has been fast, which presents all its own problems. I mean, you can never foresee this sort of stuff. I mean, there's a lot more detailed stuff to get into, like sourcing and you know, making sure that you can sustain the growth, etc. But the beverage business is really interesting. I started it with my own capital. I gave myself a big loan of $5,000.
Okay. Yeah.
And so it doesn't take that. The point being is that it doesn't take a lot of money to start a successful business.
Yeah.
You know, some people think you have to raise millions of dollars, and in some ventures you do, but you don't. you don't need connections, you don't need a lot of money, you don't need experience, you just need to start.
Yeah.
And so that's important to know.
And yeah, and even a big business like the beverage business, so you're like manufacturing stuff, right? You're making your drink or whatever. It seems like this is a massive task that's out of reach for most people, but yet you started with $5,000, right? If you have even the slightest ambition, you can whip up $5,000 to get started. You're bootstrapping your way to success. All of my companies were bootstrapped, right? You start small. There is a pathway to building your business by starting very small. And I want to build on something that you mentioned earlier, which was actually something we talked about in the last session. You have a network. You have a network of people that you can build on social media, right? That could be the starting point for building a business. If you have a community, right, that you are building, this is a market that you can tap into to take that first step. It's not going to make you a billionaire, but you know what? It's going to enable you to turn that $5,000 investment to build up a little momentum to start your little operation. And then it snowballs from there, right?
You can also use social media as a test platform. So a lot of times when I started my businesses, I didn't have that available. 20 years ago, even, I guess 20 years ago, let's say Facebook started. No one really knew what it was or how to use it. I've started a lot of ventures, like for instance, I started something that literally was Uber Eats, but I started it way too early. We weren't using smartphones. People weren't so dependent on delivery. Amazon really wasn't like a retailer at that point. They were still doing books. I've started a lot of ventures that were too early for its time. So I should be a billionaire, I don't know, 100 times over. But timing is a key factor. And again, like as an entrepreneur, you don't harp, but I never sit here and say like, boo-hoo me, I was too early.
Right.
I've done that with food ventures. I did something that was even local. It started right here on North Avenue, and I actually brought it to about 20 different college campuses, and it was basically Chipotle, but it was quesadillas instead of burritos. And it was a successful venture on its own, but again, it was just a little bit too early.
Yeah.
And so I ended up selling that business and moving. I thought for me that was the right move. Sold and moved on. But yes, going back to social media, I think it's great. If you have an idea, you could actually create, I don't want to say like a fake company, but like a pseudo company and put it out there like that and see if it sticks. Do people care? Are they following you? Are they sharing your stuff? And if they are, then maybe you start putting a little bit more to it. I do that to this day.
I did it all the time. I would create fake companies if I have an idea and run ads and take phone calls, right? You don't have to take money,
Right.
but you'll be able to register exactly whether there is demand for that, and it's cheap. You can run ads for cheap just to get a sense. Or, as part of the bootstrapping process, create a waiting list. Right? See if you can get people to sign up to a waiting list. That'll signal to you whether there's interest in that, right? And you can pre-sell products. We talked about that in last session, right? There's so many ways of going about this and testing it.
Right. There's platforms out there that specifically do what you just said. Kickstart. You can pre-sell product to raise the capital to actually create your product or company. One thing you said a little earlier that I also want to stress, I think is really important, and this is something that I've learned over my 25-year experience as business owner, entrepreneur. A lot of people think the right move is to start big and like just all of a sudden everyone's going to come your way. I'm a big believer in outgrowing each phase. So even, let's just say, if we just left it at my cafeteria company, I'm probably considered extremely successful, right? So I could have bought a massive facility to produce my wine. I could have hired the best winemakers. I could have spent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars to market it, right? But the consumers are very smart. So they know the difference between genuine passion and paid for passion, right? So what I did with the wine company, Sangria company, I started in my garage. It was about 10 foot by 10 foot wide, tight little space, barely could move in there. That's where I started. I thrived in there for a while, really struck it. Didn't hire anyone. I was waking up sometimes at 2 in the morning to produce product to get it to a farmer's market by 7 in the morning. And then just from that get to a point where you absolutely outgrow that. You cannot function in there anymore. From that moved to another space, which I'm in now, and I've already outgrown this space much quicker than I anticipated. So now I'm already searching for the next. So when you do that, you learn a lot about yourself, your business, your capacity, and that all helps you when you grow, right? I think growth is underrated in growing a business because it brings problems that you couldn't possibly foresee. No matter how much you study other companies, each company is unique, each set of issues is unique, and so by outgrowing each phase and building plateaus, as I call them, you never want to go back below the last plateau. And if you do that, and then you look back 20 years from now, you're on top of a mountain, and you might be a billionaire.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, so I think that's a good point to make about slow, steady, patient growth.
Yeah.
There's no shortcuts. Now, granted, you hear these somebody started an AI company, it's worth $500 billion, some crazy stuff. It can happen. That's not the norm.
Right. Yeah. And that's why it's great that we have you here, because you represent a lot more of what entrepreneurship looks like, right? But when you look at the media, what's glamorized, right, is these VC checks that they're cutting for these tech companies, and that's their vision of entrepreneurship.
It's not reality.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be the first one to tell you, even now, I don't ever have to work again in my life, but I work almost 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. I don't have vacation. I don't even want vacation. I'm actually so passionate about what I do that I don't need a vacation because I don't dread what I do every day. Again, I might be a little extreme, but that's the path that I'm on. I know exactly where I'm going. And so entrepreneurship can be ugly at times. It's not as glamorous as it always seems. You know, eventually, after you start your company, you're going to start hiring people. People present all sorts of problems, right? It's not so it's not so easy to hire people and manage people. That's why I always say, back to the core. People are at the core of every business. Either they're your customers, they're your employees, or whatever it may be, your investors. You have to understand people. And so, you know, over time, I've learned a lot about what motivates people, or how to keep them motivated, how to keep them satisfied, how to mitigate, you know, problems that arise. Like in my food service business, at this point, I have about 150 employees. Again, not tremendous, but it's a lot. I know each and every one of them, and I spend a lot of time mitigating issues amongst them. You know, so these are all things that you can't foresee as you grow, but they're there and they're real.
Yeah. I have a question about that, but before I go into my questions, I want to open it up to the floor again, see if we have any questions from the audience. Yeah, there we go, in the back.
Hi, we talk about AI a lot in our classes. Do you use AI in your businesses, and if so, in what parts of the businesses, and if not, then are you going to use AI in the future?
I love AI. I mean, it is the smartest, most comprehensive tool you can use, and at this stage, it's still a baby. So I'm super excited to see where this goes. And I use it mostly for a lot of like technical stuff. I don't use it to write like emails or things like that. But again, I don't knock any of that. I think it's all great. Any tool you can use at your disposal as an entrepreneur to better your mission is a tool that's worthy of your use. And I'm like I said, I'm really excited to see where AI goes. It's evolving, and we're just at the baby stages of it. And already, it can shave like a lot of downfall from like your business.
From your perspective, have companies pitched you on their sort of magic AI product that's going to automate like all the tasks, your back office tasks or whatever? And have you tried any of that? Experimented with it?
I haven't used it to that degree. I haven't been pitched that. So again, I'm in like a product where we actually produce a physical product.
Yeah.
So we're probably like on their back burner.
That's right,
We're like
that's right.
their next round of
Yeah.
calls. I think really where AI is going to excel is like in a lot of cloud-based businesses.
Yeah.
I mean, I've read stuff now where you can actually start an AI business. You don't have to do anything.
That's
It does it all for you. You just, and that's an interesting thing too. So I'm all for innovation. I've embraced it every step of the way. When our generation really started was kind of pre, like, technology expansion. And so we've seen all the stages from, the earliest computers to, data centers to, automating stuff to now. I mean, it literally is endless. It's through social media as well. And so as entrepreneurs, I think you stay young, you stay relevant, you stay up on the most modern technology. I mean, I have mentors that are in their 80s and 90s, and I'm blown away that they know how, like, the algorithms on Instagram work. I mean, these are very successful individuals, and they don't use it for personal use, of course, but for their businesses, they're abreast to all the technology. And I think it goes back to something I said earlier. As entrepreneurs, business owners, you always are learning. You always want to be educating yourself. You always want to be on the cutting edge. It's like an athlete, right? You train so that you can perform at the highest level. And maybe you're using tools to train that give you an advantage. You're doing that as an entrepreneur as well. Because if you're not, there's someone else out there that is. And so that can be your competitor, and they can potentially advance faster, and you get a bigger account, get more customers. They could actually just demolish your business, make it disappear.
Yeah.
So that's important as well.
Yeah, and so, you bring up the fact that you're just motivated to always be on top of the latest technology because you know how disruptive it can be, and you're on top of the progress of your company, where it sits relative to the competition. You are what Mark Andreessen might say is in founder mode, right? And you see this transition with some companies where the founder's no longer at the helm. Like we'll see this with Apple, let's say, and it's taken over by people more like managers, and there's a shift. Right? They just don't view the world in the same way. They haven't developed an entrepreneurial mindset that will drive them to stay on top of things, even when you're into your 80s, right? His name escapes me, but the person who was now the richest man in the world from Oracle.
Larry Ellison.
He's in his 80s. He's still on top of his game, and he just recently made a couple of $100 billion in AI. Right, because he's an entrepreneur, right? And he spent a lifetime developing that kind of mindset that enables you to view the world in a different way, and it impacts your behaviors and motivates you to do very different things. And yeah, it's a lifetime to develop, but you're different, right? You're different from just managers, let's say.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And, you know, I do want to emphasize that there are days that you wake up, right? We're human, right? So there's days I don't want to work. There's days I wish I could turn this passion off, but you can't.
Yeah, right.
You can't. You have to remind yourself, like, I chose this. This is my path. This is what I want to do. And if you're as competitive as I am, which I think any true entrepreneur is competitive, you just don't allow yourself to do that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something that comes, I think, with being time as an entrepreneur, to have that burning desire and passion. It can come at any point in your journey, but to me, it's more like a snowball. It grows with. And the other thing, too, that's important to say is, like, I'm saying, yes, start now if you're excited about being an entrepreneur or owning a business or have an idea, but there's never, like, too late to start. I have a lot of conversations with folks that are much older, in their 60s, and have already had a full career, and then they want to start a business.
Yeah.
And they say to me, but I'm too old, or I don't have the energy, and I said, it's never too late. If you do have the passion, the energy will follow.
Yeah.
The age doesn't. If you look in history, there's like a ton of people that have started in their 60s or 70s and created some very profound companies throughout history, like Colonel Sanders, for instance, with KFC.
Oh, interesting.
He was 62 when he started KFC.
Wow, I didn't know that. And that's an iconic brand. And
He also started Wendy's, by the way.
Did he
which is
really?
Interesting, yes. Same guy.
Okay. Okay, different character. Maybe a wife or a daughter or something. I don't know.
I forget the particulars of it, but the
Okay.
point is, he didn't start till he was in his 60s,
Yeah,
and he created two very profound brands,
yeah.
national brand, global brands, I guess.
Exactly. These are massive companies, right? And it also speaks to the system of entrepreneurship. It rewards good products, right? If you're selling something that people want, it doesn't matter how old you are, right? So if you have a good idea, right, the world is willing to reward you. It doesn't matter who you are, right, what you look like, how old you are. They just want value in their lives, right? And there are people out there who are willing to pay for that. I want to, again, open up the floor to questions. We still have a few more minutes. Anyone have any questions?
I have a question.
Go for it, Marisol. Yes.
So, did it take you a long time to perfect the recipe?
So the recipe for the wine was, took over a decade. So when I first started, right, so the way that Manor Sangria started as an on-site beverage, not something that I was drawing up, selling and distributing. People at my tiki bar were asking for sangria. Now, at this time, I don't know much about sangria. I don't like wine. I'm allergic to all the fruits. So I just do some quick recipe searches and put together something that was really bad, like subpar quality. People had no problem telling me it was so bad. But I happen to be a perfectionist aside from being an entrepreneur. So that's a whole nother sit down. But basically, I took it upon myself to turn that opinion around. So I didn't want people to think like, okay, here we have this guy who runs a great food service, but is serving like maybe the worst sangria on earth. So in my spare time, again, going back to arming yourself with knowledge and technology and just constantly learning, I started researching Spain, which is where I thought sangria was the most profound.
Okay.
So now I'm researching, Spanish winemakers and recipes, and really dug in to find that Portugal has really good sangria too, like in direct competition with Spain. So now I start studying all the Portuguese winemakers and recipes and ingredients. And then I come to find out that South America has their own version. And so same process, and I really learned, almost become an expert. I guess at this point you could say I am an expert in sangria and winemaking for this purpose. And so within about 4 years, people started saying like, okay, it's not the worst sangria I ever had. It's still not that good, but it's, you're not at the worst point anymore. And so you start gaining a little momentum, your confidence starts building, you're listening to all the feedback, because of course I can't drink it myself. And so I would say after about 7 years of producing this wine at a very small scale, people really started taking a liking to it, to the point where they were coming to my tiki bar and bringing friends just to try the sangria. So now you're building all this momentum. I still have in my head no vision of selling this as a standalone product. I'm just so excited people are coming to my food place to like eat my food, which I'm so passionate about. I'm still all the while listening, learning, teaching, trying different recipes and methods, different combinations of grapes, like really digging in. It was after about 10 years that people started saying, this is the best sangria I've ever had. And I have to believe them. These are country club members, so well-traveled people, been all over the world. And this praise kept growing, and they were bringing friends to prove it. So to me, it was more than just a talking point. These are the same people 10 years earlier that were telling me it was so bad. And so I kind of built on that. And again, at that point, 10 years in, still no idea of like, I'm going to jar this and sell it and distribute it. It wasn't until COVID hit that I was like, you know what? It's been almost 15 or 20 years of high praise. It's got to be good. People buy it. People have been coming just for it. Let me test it out and see. So it was a very long, patient process. And it took a lot of time to curate the recipe, and I don't know, it may be the best in the world.
Which is better, the red or the white?
White is a sin. We don't make white sangria.
Oh, well, I like it.
Can you define sangria? What is sangria? I'm not a drinker. I don't even know what this is.
No,
Sangria means blood. In its purest form, it should be red. And I do a lot of seasonal stuff, so I keep people interested all year, but none of my sangria is sweet. It's all very level. Even my reds, they're not heavy. I don't use liqueurs, which is very different than a lot of sangria recipes. I don't put any sugar in there additional. I don't use any fillers, meaning soda, fruit juice added sugar. It's clean and pure, and I really let the fruits do the work. And that's what I learned over those 20 years, that time and patience, just like entrepreneurship, is the key to success with my sangria.
Yeah, wow. And, that's a first-hand look at the process, right, of building something great. But it was still serendipitous that COVID struck, and that was the reason that you struck out and turned this into a product.
Well, I think even making it more than just like a COVID thing, I think any trial and tribulation can open new doors. So, right, it's all about perspective when we talk about success. Because a lot of people I know that own businesses shut down and never opened up, and they're still today, crying the blues. And I just say that's a personality thing. That, yes, you may have lost your business, and for me, I would say, like, I'm sorry to hear that for anyone, but you could have pivoted. You could have done other things. You could have used that time to create something new. Yeah. So it's all about like perspective in this journey of entrepreneurship.
So it's the cauldron where entrepreneurship is forged, right? It's just the perspective, right? Because at the heart of entrepreneurship is the ability to pivot, right? And this is what we do as entrepreneurs. We overcome obstacles, right? And this is where we thrive, right? Coming up with the solutions and answers that others aren't either willing to do or haven't come up with.
I think so. I mean, for me, I can't speak for every entrepreneur, but for me, you know, being an entrepreneur is about beating the odds, right? Because all the odds are kind of stacked against you as an entrepreneur, especially if you're, you know, heading out into uncharted waters, like creating new technologies or new processes or new services that maybe never existed. So, like for me, for instance, I say like I want to become a billionaire. That's like a milestone for me. It's not because I want $1 billion, right? Because to be honest, after a certain number, none of the money matters, right? It's not about that. I want to become a billionaire because it's probably one of the single hardest things to do, especially when you're building it from scratch.
So it's a marker of accomplishment,
I would think. I just think it's such a hard thing to achieve. You know, we hear about a lot of billionaires, but it's a very challenging thing. Some of these billionaires have been at it for 40 years to get to that point. You know, you just hear that they're the, you know, either the richest person or whatever. Again, it's not about the actual money. I don't want $1 billion. I would probably donate it all back to charitable causes. Because after a certain point, and the point's not that far either, I would say somewhere after like $15 or $20 million, you don't ever have to worry about money again if you're even halfway smart with investing it.
Yes.
But the milestone of hitting that, to me, is what drives me.
Yep. I have one last question, but before we get to that, I think we're out of time. I want to make sure I get any last questions from the audience. Yeah, go for it.
All right, so I wanted to ask you, like, you know, nowadays, you know, there's technology, you know, new, like, smart innovations being made every day. And I was going to ask you, like, what made you still want to pursue, like, a sangria business, knowing that, like, you know, there's new competitors every day, you know, people coming out strong with, you know, new trendy stuff. So, and I know you said that, like, once, like, you know, things are going smoothly, you get bored of it. So, you know, what made you want to focus on the sangria business?
That's a good point. So when I decided that I was going to actually launch the Sangria, my mission was to bring people together. You know, that was my whole mission statement. Like, I'm creating Manor Sangria to bring people together. And so, you know, when you focus on that, and then you actually see it starting to happen, and this like growing community around your product, I think physical products are always gonna be a need. There's always gonna be a need for physical products, right? So, yes, it is scary when there's like so much technology, so much competition, and all this stuff out there. But again, it goes back to what I said earlier about confidence in yourself, right? When you start your own company, you're reinvesting into yourself. And so that comes with time. I would say, like, in the lifespan of an entrepreneur, you have that confidence because you're fearless initially, right? So that's where the confidence comes from. You're fearless. As you get older, you become a little more fearful because you have assets to protect as well as your reputation and stuff like that. But you trade out the fearless aspect for the confidence because you have a track record and you know what you're capable of. So yes, it's always scary. There's always competition. There's always ever-changing technologies. For me, I believed in the product I created over 20 years, and I just felt like I'm going to give this a good push and see what happens. And I'm still in it. I mean, I'm still growing. I still have a lot of hurdles to overcome. As you grow, as you distribute, as you create new relationships, they all bring new sets of challenges that you have to deal with and address and figure out. But that's what keeps me going, right? Figuring out those challenges. Like, if it's more complicated to me, I'm more addicted to it and want to figure that out, the intricacies of it. And I'm also very competitive too, so that's another thing. So the more competitors out there, the more I want to beat them, or, you know, whatever term you want to use. I want to get ahead, or I want to gain an advantage over my competitors. That drives me. Could be very intimidating, but I use it as a motivation.
Yeah, and I love what you said. You know, one way to rise above the competition is to embed meaning and purpose in your company and your product, right? And so your product is more than just, I don't know, a fruity alcohol drink. It's bringing people together. If that can shine through, that's one way of distinguishing yourself from a very sort of competitive field that you might be up against.
One thing I would say, like, about passion and how contagious passion is. So I value all of my customer base. Every single one of them. I respond to every single DM I get, and I get like hundreds per day. I respond to every single email. I don't like, that's why I don't use AI for that. That's why I don't hire someone to do it. People feel my passion that comes through, and I feed off of their, you know, kind words about my product. So it's a give and take, but it is important to like stay connected. And this is how important passion is. I've even won over the hearts of A-list celebrities. I've never spent a single dollar on marketing or advertising. I'll never pay an influencer to promote my product on social media, and I've had A-listers promoting my product. Like, you would have to pay these people $1 million just for a post, and they've posted me for free. So passion, I can't stress enough. You have to like really be passionate. It can't be fake.
Yeah, I agree. If you can get to the point where you get endorsements, it really is, you know, signals that you're onto something special with your product. That's how you win in business. That's a great place to end. I think we are out of time, so I want to thank you so much. This has been so much fun.